John Matthews, a decorated ICE agent, and his two young children were driving home on a quiet suburban night when one reckless decision would turn their lives upside down and leave a community questioning everything they thought they knew about trust and authority. It was a typical evening in the quiet suburbs, the kind of night where the streets seemed to sigh with calm. Streetlights cast pools of yellow light onto sidewalks, and the faint sound of distant traffic hummed through the air. Families were settling in for the night, doors locked, lights dimmed, and televisions flickering in the background. The neighborhood was the kind of place where children played outside during the day and neighbors waved politely when passing on the street. No one expected anything unusual to disturb the serene rhythm of their routines. But around 11 p.m., the peace was interrupted by the sound of a pickup truck engine, aggressive and loud against the stillness of the night. The vehicle sped past residential homes, its tires crunching over gravel driveways and swerving slightly as it cut through the streets. The driver's movements were unpredictable. He drifted between lanes, sometimes correcting abruptly, sometimes letting the truck slide too close to the curb. A nearby patrol car noticed the erratic driving and began to follow, its presence discreet at first. Inside the truck, the atmosphere was tense. The driver's hands gripped the wheel tightly, knuckles white under the dim glow of the dashboard lights. Every movement seemed deliberate but shaky, as if he were struggling to maintain control not just of the truck but of his own focus. In the back seat, two young children sat, their small bodies buckled in seat belts. They were quiet, perhaps tired, perhaps unaware of the danger surrounding them, trusting the adult in the front to get them home safely. The thought that they were in harm's way seemed almost invisible to the driver. The officer tailing the truck radioed dispatch, describing the erratic driving and noting the presence of children. The voice over the radio was calm, but the officer's eyes were alert, scanning for sudden movements or unexpected turns. He knew that any mistake could lead to disaster. There was a sense of growing urgency, a tension that threaded through the silent streets. Each second felt heavier as the truck continued to weave, accelerating at times and slowing unexpectedly at others. The patrol car kept a safe distance, allowing the driver to continue while assessing the risk. The night seemed to stretch, minutes becoming long stretches of anticipation. The children's presence added another layer of danger, something the officer could not ignore. Each stoplight and intersection became a potential hazard, each passing shadow a reminder of how fragile the situation had become. The ordinary calm of the neighborhood now seemed like a fragile illusion, a backdrop to a night that was quietly spiraling into chaos. As the truck approached a curve in the road, the officer tightened his grip on the steering wheel, ready for the moment to intervene. The erratic patterns of movement, the unsteady handling, and the unusual timing of acceleration and braking all painted a picture that something was very wrong. Neighbors looked out their windows, drawn by the noise, sensing that the quiet of the evening had been broken in a serious way. The scene was ordinary in appearance, but charged with the tension of what could happen if the erratic driving continued unchecked. Every turn of the wheel, every light of the dashboard, and every faint sound from the truck created a mounting sense of suspense. The officer's training and instincts were on high alert, reading the situation with a mix of caution and urgency. What might have been a simple traffic stop under normal circumstances had now transformed into a delicate situation that required precision, patience, and careful judgment. The calm of the night was gone, replaced by the quiet anticipation of a potentially dangerous confrontation that could unfold at any moment. The truck finally slowed near the side of the road, tires crunching against gravel as it came to a hesitant stop. The officer approached cautiously, flashlight in hand, aware that any sudden movement from the driver could escalate the situation. The night was quiet, almost oppressively so, except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. The driver rolled down his window slowly, the dim light from inside the truck revealing a composed face that seemed almost unreadable. There was a calmness that didn't quite fit the dangerous behavior witnessed just moments before. The officer's instincts told him immediately that something was off. The strong scent of alcohol filled the air, sharp and unmistakable, cutting through the night's stillness. It wasn't subtle. It clung to the interior of the truck and lingered around the driver, making it clear that he had been drinking. Standard procedure kicked in as the officer requested the driver step out of the vehicle. The driver's movements were measured, yet slightly unsteady. Each step he took seemed to confirm what the patrol car had suspected: he was impaired. As the officer guided him through a series of sobriety tests, it became increasingly evident that the driver was struggling. His balance wavered, his speech slurred, and his ability to follow basic instructions faltered. The officer maintained a professional composure, but inside, a knot of concern tightened. The driver's children sat quietly in the back seat, oblivious to the potential danger they had just narrowly avoided. The realization that they could have been seriously harmed hung heavy in the night air. Every failed test, every hesitant movement of the driver amplified the seriousness of the situation. When the facts came together, the officer and backup were faced with a startling truth: the driver was not just anyone. He was a veteran ICE agent, someone entrusted with upholding the law and protecting the public. His career, reputation, and training all suggested a person who understood the responsibilities of authority and the risks of reckless behavior. Yet, on this night, that trust had been broken. The image of the officer, handcuffing a respected agent while ensuring the children remained unharmed, was a stark reminder that even those in positions of power are not immune to poor judgment. The arrest unfolded with careful precision. The children were immediately secured with a relative called to pick them up, their safety prioritized above all else. Authorities documented the scene meticulously, taking photographs and recording the details of the traffic stop. The truck, evidence of the erratic behavior, was towed and logged into the system. Each step was procedural, but the tension lingered, a silent acknowledgement of how close the situation had come to a tragic outcome. News of the arrest began to spread quickly through the community. Neighbors who had once waved politely now exchanged worried glances and hushed conversations. Colleagues within the ICE agency struggled to reconcile the disciplined officer they knew with the man now facing serious charges. It was a moment that shook the perception of trust and authority, revealing how a single decision could ripple far beyond the immediate scene. The quiet streets, once calm and ordinary, had become the backdrop for a story of recklessness, accountability, and the stark consequences of choices made under the influence. As the news of the arrest spread, the image of the ICE agent began to unravel in ways few could have anticipated. On the surface, he had been the model of dedication and professionalism, a figure respected in his department and trusted by the community. He had a record filled with commendations and promotions, evidence of years of service in a demanding and high-stakes job. Colleagues remembered him as someone who followed protocols, someone who could be counted on during tense operations. Yet behind the badge, investigators began to uncover a more complicated story, one that painted a very different picture. Friends and acquaintances described a man under constant pressure. Long hours, high-risk assignments, and the unrelenting demands of law enforcement had left their mark. He was meticulous and disciplined at work, but at home, sources suggested he struggled with stress and frustration. Small arguments at home, signs of tension with family responsibilities, and occasional lapses in judgment began to emerge as part of the narrative. It was a pattern that had gone unnoticed or unaddressed for years, hidden behind a polished exterior and the authority of his uniform. Investigators delved deeper, examining prior incidents that had never escalated to criminal charges. Traffic complaints, minor collisions, and reports of erratic driving all surfaced, forming a timeline that suggested a growing problem. Each minor infraction alone seemed inconsequential, but together they painted a warning that had gone unheeded. The DUI that night, with children in the back seat, was not just a random act. It appeared as the culmination of ongoing behavior that had never been properly addressed. The contrast between public persona and private struggles highlighted a difficult truth about those in positions of authority. The agency he served was built on trust, discipline, and accountability, yet this single night exposed vulnerabilities that could not be ignored. Colleagues were shocked, some finding it hard to reconcile the disciplined agent they knew with the reckless man who had endangered his children. The community, too, grappled with the revelation, struggling to understand how someone sworn to enforce the law could so blatantly break it. Psychologists and experts on law enforcement behavior offered insight into what might have led to the incident. They cited stress accumulation, high-pressure work environments, and personal struggles as factors that can sometimes erode judgment. Yet they emphasized that these explanations could not excuse the endangerment of children or the act of driving under the influence. The night of the arrest became a focal point for broader discussions about accountability, mental health, and high-stress professions, and the importance of addressing warning signs before they escalate. Through interviews, court documents, and investigative reporting, the narrative began to show layers of human complexity. The ICE agent was neither purely villain nor purely victim of circumstance. He was a man whose personal challenges intersected dangerously with his professional authority. Each revelation added depth to the story, showing how a respected figure could suddenly become the center of a community's shock and outrage. The night that started as a quiet drive home had transformed into a symbol of risk, responsibility, and the hidden pressures that even the most disciplined individuals can carry, sometimes with devastating consequences. The arrest quickly triggered a chain reaction that extended far beyond the quiet streets where it had occurred. Within hours, news outlets began reporting the incident, highlighting the shocking fact that an ICE agent, a person sworn to uphold the law, had been taken into custody for driving under the influence with children in the vehicle. The story dominated local headlines, sparking debates on social media and within the community about accountability, privilege, and the responsibilities of those in positions of authority. Every detail of the case was scrutinized, from the agent's past record to the circumstances of the arrest, and the narrative rapidly became high-profile. Legal proceedings moved swiftly. Court documents revealed the severity of the charges: DUI with minors in the vehicle, reckless endangerment, and multiple prior traffic violations that now appeared relevant to the case. The involvement of children elevated the consequences, creating the potential for serious penalties. Attorneys and legal experts began analyzing the case, pointing out that while first-time DUI offenders sometimes receive leniency, the presence of minors drastically changes the legal landscape. The law treats children as especially vulnerable, and endangerment carries significant weight in determining both sentencing and public perception. The courtroom itself became a stage for the broader implications of the incident. Prosecutors painted a picture of recklessness and negligence, emphasizing the gap between the agent's public persona and his actions that night. Defense attorneys, meanwhile, sought to contextualize the incident, referencing stress, long work hours, and personal struggles, attempting to mitigate the consequences. The legal battle unfolded with intense scrutiny, each hearing and motion followed closely by journalists and members of the community who wanted answers. Every detail of testimony, every piece of evidence became a focal point for understanding not just what had happened, but why it had happened. The ICE agency faced its own reckoning. Officials were forced to confront questions about oversight, mental health support, and accountability within their ranks. Public trust, painstakingly built over years, was challenged by a single incident that seemed to contradict the very values the agency promoted. Internal investigations were launched, examining not only the individual's actions but also whether any systemic issues contributed to the circumstances. The case became a cautionary tale within law enforcement circles, illustrating that even those trained to enforce the law can fall victim to poor judgment with far-reaching consequences. As the legal process continued, the public watched closely, grappling with a mix of fascination, outrage, and disbelief. The narrative had shifted from a simple DUI arrest to a story about the fragility of trust, the dangers of privilege, and the weight of responsibility carried by those in positions of authority. Court hearings revealed more about the agent's personal life and career, each detail adding layers of complexity to the story. The case demonstrated that legal consequences are only one part of accountability. Social, professional, and familial ramifications also play a critical role. By the time the trial neared its conclusion, the incident had become more than a local news story. It served as a cautionary example of how quickly a single decision can escalate into a public spectacle, impacting careers, families, and community trust. The case highlighted the delicate balance between authority and responsibility, showing that no one, regardless of rank or reputation, is immune from the consequences of reckless behavior. It was a legal battle that carried lessons far beyond the courtroom, illustrating the profound impact of choices made in moments of poor judgment. The consequences of that single night extended far beyond the courtroom, rippling through the lives of everyone involved. The ICE agent faced a series of punishments that, while legal in nature, also carried long-lasting personal and professional implications. Fines were imposed, licenses suspended, and mandatory alcohol counseling required. Probation ensured that he would be monitored for months to come, a constant reminder of the recklessness that had upended the lives of his children and shaken public trust. Each legal measure, though carefully calculated, reflected a broader truth. Accountability can never be fully contained to a piece of paper or a sentence. It lives in the everyday consequences that follow. His career, once defined by dedication and achievement, was effectively over. Promotions and commendations could not shield him from the consequences of the choices he had made. Colleagues struggled to reconcile the image of the disciplined, competent officer with the man who had endangered his own children. The agency faced questions about oversight and the support provided to agents in high-stress roles, but for the agent himself, the impact was deeply personal. Years of professional reputation could not erase the public record of his actions, nor could it undo the fear and confusion experienced by the children in the backseat that night. The children, although physically unharmed, carried the memory of the incident in ways that could not be measured. The abrupt police intervention, the tension of the arrest, and the realization that their safety had been compromised left an imprint. Families in the community reflected on the fragility of safety and the responsibilities adults bear when entrusted with young lives. Parents questioned the assumptions they made about those in authority, realizing that danger could come from unexpected places. The night that began as a quiet drive home became a defining moment for understanding the weight of responsibility and the vulnerability of trust. Beyond the immediate family, the community felt the reverberations. Neighbors and colleagues discussed the incident for weeks, examining their own assumptions about safety and authority. It became a cautionary tale in parenting groups, law enforcement circles, and among community members, a story of how quickly ordinary routines can shift into crises. The arrest was a reminder that every action carries consequences, particularly when those actions involve vulnerable individuals. Even those trained to protect others are human, capable of error, and sometimes blind to the risks of their own behavior. In the aftermath, reflection and scrutiny dominated the narrative. Media coverage emphasized not just the crime but the lessons embedded within it. The story illustrated the fragile line between authority and recklessness, showing how easily trust can be broken. The ICE agent's life had changed irrevocably, as had the lives of his children and the perception of the community around him. The quiet streets that had once symbolized safety became a backdrop for a story about accountability, human error, and the profound consequences of a single, dangerous choice. The incident stood as a lasting reminder that responsibility cannot be delegated, reputation cannot erase actions, and the shadow of one night's mistake can linger far longer than anyone expects.